201. Doubts. After passing the most important theory exam for control, Avada was essentially done with the assessment. The last step was a short administrative interview, a questionnaire, and a few routine questions, so he decided to finish it before the ministry closed for the day. He didn't want it nagging at him while he tried to sleep. "Crew impuri?" the clerk asked. He looked flat and tired, as if it were nearly quitting time, but there was a sharp undercurrent in his mood that didn't match someone about to go home. "That's me," Avada answered, handing over the certificates from his previous exams for inspection. The clerk glanced through them, checked them against the records, nodded, and pushed the papers back. "Just a few simple questions. Please answer truthfully and carefully." Avada sat up a little straighter. "Why did you choose to live in Britain?" "Because I'm from Australia, part of the Commonwealth, same language. The magical community there is too small. I wanted somewhere more prosperous." "Do you still own property back home?" "I brought everything with me. An explosion almost wiped out what my teacher and I had." The clerk's face softened. "I'm very sorry. Have you ever joined any organizations or associations in Australia?" "No." "Do you plan to start a family here?" "Not at the moment." "Would you consider living within Muggle society?" "No." "That would save you a lot of trouble," the clerk muttered, then continued. "After settling in Britain, where do you plan to live? How will you support yourself?" "I'll stay at the Leaky Cauldron for now, then apply for a plot in one of the ministry-designated wizarding settlements, probably somewhere in Scotland. As for work, I've heard that many pureblood families have been having anti-apparition jinxes installed in their homes lately, and I've done some research in spatial magic, so." The clerk's expression shifted violently when Avada mentioned the anti-apparition jinxes. A storm of emotion flashed through him: anger, hatred, regret, fear, then vanished almost as quickly. Avada frowned for a moment, then composed himself. The clerk hadn't noticed the brief pause. "Sir? Are you all right?" "Oh, sorry, Mr. Taylor. I was a little distracted." "You don't look well. Do you need assistance?" No, let's continue." He took a large gulp from the water on the desk and carried on. "Do you have any relatives or friends in Britain?" "No." Avada swallowed the small doubts stirring in him and answered the rest of the questions. "Have you ever suffered from a magical illness?" "No." After a few dozen more routine queries, the clerk tapped Avada's documents with his wand, leaving a small enchanted mark. "Very good. You have completed the test. Congratulations. You've now been granted long-term residency by the British Ministry of Magic. You may apply for land in a ministry-designated wizarding settlement or register your identity in Muggle society after passing the necessary test. After 3 years of work and tax payments, you'll be eligible for British wizarding citizenship." Taylor sorted the papers back into a neat pile, reciting the formalities as he did so with a somewhat distant air. Avada beamed, putting on the kind of smile that suggested he'd just swallowed a bottle of strong drink and felt pleasantly lightheaded. "What's your name? I should at least buy you a meal to celebrate." "Just call me Taylor." Taylor's face eased into a grin. "No need for a meal. I'm usually too busy for that. Go out and enjoy the customs of your new home instead of staying cooped up in a gloomy office, right?" "You're right. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Truly, thank you." Avada fixed Taylor's face in his mind, then left the office. After stopping by the Auror office to retrieve his trunk, he apparated to Diagon Alley and walked straight to the Leaky Cauldron. Taylor, Avada thought, was a common surname. If he worked at the ministry, he probably came from a medium-sized pureblood family, not one of the sacred 28. But why had Taylor reacted so strongly when Avada mentioned that pureblood families were having anti-apparition jinxes installed? What could have provoked such anger, hatred, regret, and fear? Did many families really mean there was a broader problem? The feeling nagged at him, an unreliable intuition he hadn't needed before, now whispering that something was off. "Hey, old Tom," he called as soon as he stepped into the pub. It wasn't a holiday, and it wasn't closing time, so the place was quiet. His voice carried and drew a few heads. "Oh, isn't that Mr. Impuri?" Old Tom, who ran the Leaky Cauldron, was good at recognizing a customer, especially a lodger from abroad. "By the look on your face, did it go well?" "It did. I have legal long-term residency now. That's worth celebrating. Fancy a drink?" I'll pass. I'm not keen on alcohol. I'd sooner get a proper night's sleep. I'll be staying another week. The place is pleasant. He dropped 2 galleons and a sickle on the bar. Old Tom pocketed the coins with a chuckle. Lowering his voice, Avada leaned in. Old Tom, you're well informed. Do you know about pure-blood families hiring people to install anti-apparition jinxes in their homes? 202. Low-cost performance? Have you heard about this? Old Tom raised his eyebrows, surprised. I didn't think many people knew. Why do you ask? I met a helpful examiner during my test, Avada said, calm and straightforward. He told me about it and even suggested I look for work in this area to earn my first pot of gold. Old Tom visibly stirred. The examiner recommended you? You can set up an anti-apparition jinx? Avada meant to be modest, but Old Tom pressed the point, so he took the space knowledge license issued by the Ministry of Magic from his pocket, set it on the table, and slid it toward him. This is a controlled knowledge license? Old Tom, who kept up with such things, immediately recognized its importance. He picked it up carefully and read it aloud in a quiet voice. Space-related controlled knowledge assessment certificate. Good heavens. He frowned over the details. Examination subjects, space mechanics, physics, applied specology, applied space magic management regulations. Overall score is E+. You're full of hidden talent, Old Tom declared, genuinely impressed. The Wizard Examinations Authority's assessments are highly regarded. If you get an O in one of their exams, you're practically a master in that field. You're only one step away, and you're still so young. If Professor Marchbanks heard about you, he might come see you himself. Haha, not likely, Avada replied, enjoying the praise. Old Tom took the hint and ordered another glass of cider. He pushed the certificate back toward Avada and, lowering his voice, changed the subject. But this thing you mentioned, this trend of pure-blood families putting in anti-apparition jinxes, what's going on with that? Oh, right, sorry. I got distracted. Old Tom smacked his forehead, paid for the drink, and began to explain. This hasn't been around long. We're relating 2 or 3 months at most. About 2 months ago, pure-blood families started taking out ads in papers like the Daily Prophet, looking for experts in space magic to install anti-apparition jinxes in their homes. The number of ads gradually increased. Someone even did a survey of newspaper listings and found that, based on that alone, nearly 1/5 of the pure-blood population in Britain seemed intent on installing anti-apparition jinxes. 1/5? Avada was taken aback. Old Tom shook his head. The real number is probably higher. Some well-connected families don't need to advertise, and some large families already have jinxes in place. But don't let that fraction sound larger than it is. Britain has a relatively small pure-blood population. 1/5 comes out to only a few dozen families, and some of those listings are different branches of the same family. Avada pressed on. How did this become so popular? Some say pure-bloods have been targeted after last year's events, retaliatory attacks, and so on. It doesn't fit, Old Tom said. Almost all the households placing ads are small to medium families outside the Sacred 28. That doesn't line up with the Hogwarts incident. When reporters interviewed these families, most of them downplayed it. Their reasons were all over the place: keeping up with trends, fear of Dumbledore's next Lord Voldemort, a general lack of security, even the idea that it should be as standard as a door lock. There haven't been recent rumors of attacks on purebloods, so people shrugged and called it a new, very expensive fashion. Are there still lots of ads? Avada asked. Plenty, Old Tom said, and very few people have actually solved the problem. He wiped a glass and explained the crux of it. Space magic is tightly controlled. Few wizards can legitimately work with it. Most of those who can are busy with things like undetectable extension charms. Small and medium families don't have the money to hire them. Besides, an anti-apparition jinx is hard, costly, and has poor cost-effectiveness. Poor cost-effectiveness? Avada echoed, of course. If you don't want people apparating directly into your home, you can hide your address, block owls, and apparate in and out yourself. During the worst of the you-know-who years, ordinary people managed with those measures. At worst, you build a hidden safe house. No one knows its address. Avada nodded. He knew how wizard houses were put together: a blot of land, a few charms like muggle repelling, and a house built in a day. Many blend their homes into Muggle villages or obscure them magically. If you don't publish your address, you're hard to find. The Weasley's burrow was a good example. If you also block owls, turn off the fireplaces, and only apparat in and out, you become nearly impossible to locate. And an anti-apparition jinx isn't a simple trick, Old Tom continued. Even though it mainly blocks the mental energy involved in humanoid apparition, it still requires top professional skill, a lot of time, and depending on the area, hundreds of galleons in materials. In Britain, only 3 places are fully ringed with anti-apparition jinxes: Hogwarts, Gringotts, and Azkaban. Even the Ministry hasn't put them everywhere. They protect only the most sensitive sites. For an individual household, the expense and effort simply don't make sense. Avada let that sink in. The mismatch, an expensive, difficult defense becoming suddenly fashionable among modest pureblood families, only made the trend more suspicious. Where can I see these ads, other than the Daily Prophet, he asked. They're in mainstream papers across Diagon Alley, Old Tom said. Buy any paper and you'll find at least one. Or just the Daily Prophet. It has the most and the most complete listings. Thanks. Avada finished his cider, thanked Old Tom, and stood. He headed back toward Diagon Alley with the certificate in his pocket and a new lead to follow. 203. Dumbledore himself opened the topic, a copy of the Daily Prophet. Thanks. Clutching the newly bought paper, Avada apparated straight back to his room at the Leaky Cauldron, shrugged off his outer robe, and began flicking through it. Nothing major jumped out. State visit to France, a sudden rise in the price of some herbs, another research paper about the basilisk, Sirius Black still at large, and the Hogsmeade restriction for Hogwarts on Saturday mornings to be lifted after the next term started. Where's the pureblood family's classifieds? Ads? There. He hadn't turned many pages before he hit a dense block of recruitment notices. Most of the advertisers were small to medium pureblood families. The commissions offered were large, hundreds of galleons, so buying prime space in the Prophet was no problem for them. There are really a lot of these. I'll need to cross-reference them with that pureblood directory. This deserves a proper investigation. Avada mused. Those few great pureblood houses had been badly hit by Dumbledore last year. Some family heads had even been sent to Azkaban. It wasn't impossible they were quietly stirring. But where to start? Take a random job from the ads, or look into that ministry interviewer, Taylor? He wondered. Baron? Eating in the Great Hall, Avada looked up from his plate and asked the boy sitting opposite him, who was equally absorbed in his meal, "Does your family have an anti-apparition jinx?" Students still had a few days left of the Christmas holidays, so they could move freely between the longhouse tables. Baron paused before replying. Of course, an anti-apparition jinx is practically essential for any major family. How long has it been there? Hundreds of years, I expect. It was put in when the manor was built, and we still have to maintain it every few years. Has it ever worked? A few times. I heard it held during several turbulent spells in history, including once during Lord Voldemort's reign, more than 10 years ago. Why do you ask? Has Dumbledore given you another task? No, this time it's nothing official. Avada's eye twitched. I just noticed that lately the Daily Prophet has a lot of small families advertising for experts in spatial magic to install anti-apparition jinxes. It made me curious. That doesn't make much sense. Baron put down his cutlery, surprised. If lots of families are installing anti-apparition jinxes, that usually means people feel insecure, social unrest. But if it were genuinely dangerous, would they honestly post their contact information in a paper and invite strangers to their homes? Avada frowned. Baron's objection made him realize a further inconsistency. Even during Voldemort's rule, these small families wouldn't have advertised like this. The period was too dangerous. They wouldn't have put their faces in the paper and thereby exposed their fear or displeasure with Voldemort. So why now? Maybe I can ask my father, Baron said. It's odd enough that he should know. Fine, leave it to you then. There's nothing to leave to me. If something serious happens, my father will want to know you were the first to notice the anomaly. By the way, speaking of apparition, Avada added, those anti-apparition jinxes only block human wizards, right? What if someone sent a magical creature, like a hostile house elf, to cause trouble? How do you protect against that? We don't just rely on jinxes, Baron explained. We hide our residences as much as possible. When you came to my house, you entered a modest little cottage first, and only after authentication could you go further. That also means we don't have to block owls. We can send and receive letters normally. Even our owls don't seem to know the way they flew in. How thorough. Avada sat back, thinking. With that level of protection, infiltrating a pure-blood manor would take serious intelligence work. I still don't know how Dumbledore managed to gather so much evidence right under their noses and even catch someone as well hidden as Lucius. After all, he's Dumbledore, Baron said casually. He even wants to start researching souls. 2 or 3 days after the holidays ended, Dumbledore announced something that sent shockwaves through Hogwarts. He would personally launch a research project into souls, the dark arts, and potions, and he planned to recruit student assistants. The announcement thrilled half the school and crushed the other half. Recruitment was limited to 6th years and older, and applicants needed OWL grades of O in defense against the dark arts and potions. Before joining the project, students would undergo a battery of screenings, including psychological tests, and sign a host of agreements. Students who had made exceptional contributions in combating the dark arts could be specially recruited, but they would still have to pass the screenings. Dumbledore had also invited several academic luminaries, including Nicholas Flamel, to participate. Many students who had scraped by with ease in their OWLs were left fuming. Internship opportunities for the second semester of 7th year were effectively narrowed, and there would be far fewer inexpensive laborers available. As for outstanding contributions against the dark arts, everyone knew who that implied. All right, I've eaten enough. I still need to practice flying. I'm off. Baron finished, gathered his things, picked up the broom propped beside his chair, and waved at Avada as he left. Avada finished the rest of his meal, sent Crew Impuri to lie down on the bed, temporarily removed the creature's control device, and headed for the library to look up the pureblood directory. To keep the device inconspicuous, he had put a disillusionment charm on its surface and was working on ways to miniaturize it, ideally into an earring or a tiny subdermal patch. 204. Letters from the Godfather. Time for school to start again. In the Gryffindor dormitory, Harry lay sprawled across his bed, one hand still clutching his glasses but too lazy to lift it and put them on. He stared, unfocused, at the pale morning light sluicing through the window, sighing in that rough, wakeful way that sounded as if he hadn't slept. Even hunger didn't seem a good enough reason to move. He and Ron had stayed up all night trying to catch up on schoolwork and had gone to bed too late. And for some reason, Harry hadn't slept well at all. He felt like he wouldn't get up for anything, not even if Voldemort himself rose up on the school grounds. "You can say that again," Ron mumbled beside him, in a gloomier mood than Harry. A few days into the Christmas holidays, Ron's rat Scabbers had died of old age. The whole Weasley family, who had stayed at Hogwarts for the break, had been saddened by it. The rat had lived with them for over 10 years. They'd buried Scabbers near the edge of the Forbidden Forest, then tried to cheer themselves up, handing Harry the Marauder's map in a more solemn, official way, taking turns borrowing his invisibility cloak to sneak into Hogsmeade and the like. But Ron still felt raw. That afternoon, he discovered Scabbers motionless in his pocket and had only realized too late that the rat was dead. "What are we doing today?" Harry asked listlessly. "I could lie here forever." Knock, knock, knock. His groan cut off as a rapid tapping began at the window. They both turned toward the sill and saw a large, tawny owl hammering at the glass, a long parcel clutched in its talons. "Did you buy something?" Ron said from under the covers. Harry dragged the blankets off and opened the window, shivering as the cold morning air gusted in. "No. Close it again," he said, and the owl hopped inside, dropping the parcel onto the bed. Ron burrowed his head deeper under the covers. "Maybe Seamus or Dean bought something and had it sent up early. Is there a note?" Harry started to unwrap the package. For a moment his hand froze, then he gasped. Inside lay a gleaming, perfectly balanced broomstick, the unmistakable shape, glossy wood, and gleam of a firebolt. He had wanted one ever since Diagon Alley. He unwrapped it fully and held it, turning it over to admire every detail. The golden registration number near the top, the flexible, streamlined tail of birch twigs. He felt it hum in his hands and, startled, let go. The broom hovered at exactly the right height for him to climb on. "Merlin's beard," he murmured hoarsely. "A real firebolt." Ron was on top of the covers in an instant. "Who sent it?" "I don't know. Wait, there's a card." A small card had fallen onto Harry's bed as he unwrapped the parcel. He picked it up with half a hope that it was a joke, something from the Weasley twins, and half a dread that it had been delivered to the wrong person. He turned it over and read, the words blurring for a moment as if the handwriting itself were a shock. "Merry Christmas, Harry," the note began, written in a hurried, slightly messy hand. Harry swallowed and read on. The card explained that the broom had been intended to arrive on Christmas, but the sender's circumstances had been a bit inconvenient, and a friend had needed help, so the gift was late. The tone was apologetic and oddly intimate, the handwriting showing someone trying to write neatly but not quite managing it, like someone unused to a pen or whose hand cramped when writing. "Perhaps," the card said, "we can look at this broom less traditionally. In that case, besides being a late Christmas present, it could also be compensation for your 13th birthday gift. I've heard you're very good at Quidditch. Dumbledore has told me as much, and I thought you might like this. Given my present situation, it isn't suitable for me to go to the market myself, so I bought the finest one I could." "Who is this?" Ron asked, peering over Harry's shoulder. "Some relative?" Harry's mind raced. The tone suggested someone who knew him well but wasn't a Hogwarts student and had enough money to buy the most expensive broom in the shop. After a few seconds, his eyes fell on the next lines and a breath left him. "Oh, I forgot to say earlier, Harry, perhaps you don't know, but I am your godfather." "I have a godfather," Harry blurted. "You have a godfather," Ron echoed, already imagining escape from the Dursleys. Harry read on. The writer said he had known Harry's parents, had been his father's best friend, and when Harry was born, they had entrusted him with being godfather. He went on to apologize for failing to fulfill that role after their deaths. Tragic circumstances had prevented him from getting in touch sooner. He said he couldn't reveal his identity yet or risk visiting in person for fear it might bring Harry trouble, but suggested that if Harry's curiosity couldn't be contained, he might ask Dumbledore to decide whether to tell him more. "Trust me," the card promised. "This won't last too long. Once I can confirm there is no danger, I will contact you. I've heard your life with your Muggle relatives has not been good, and that is my fault. I will find a way to help you as soon as I am able." The card closed with a note that the sender had heard about Harry's recent experiences at Hogwarts and had enclosed something else, hoping you will have a pleasant life here. As Harry reached the last line, another small folded note slipped out from the card and fluttered into his hand. On it, in the same messy, hurried hand, was a single line of text. "I, name obscured by an inkblot, godfather of Harry Potter, permit him to visit Hogsmeade." Beneath that, in smaller writing, "Give this to Dumbledore or Professor McGonagall. They will see the hidden content, and then you can enjoy Hogsmeade like the other students." 205. Could it be that Harry's godfather is black? I have a godfather? Harry forgot all about the firebolt beside him and stared at the note in his hand. And he suffered something terrible that kept him hidden for 13 years, not even daring to tell me his name. But I never knew. "Right, Harry. Do you remember?" Ron paused, thinking, then snapped his fingers. "The prophecy someone interpreted for you, the one about the black dog? That's it?" Ron's reminder lit a new urgency in Harry's eyes. Family affection, love, compensation, it fits the situation perfectly. His interpretation was right. If that's true, then your godfather, someone you've never met, must be connected to the black dog. Maybe that black dog you saw in the summer was sent by him to check on you. But how could a person be connected to a black dog? Ron mused. I don't remember any pure-blood crests with a black dog on them. Maybe he owns one. Or maybe he, like you, can speak to dogs. Harry rolled his eyes at Ron's wild guesses. You might as well suggest he can turn into a black dog at will. Useless guessing, Ron said. I'll go find Dumbledore right now. He knows everything. You're being muddled, Harry, Ron corrected himself. Dumbledore left Hogwarts several days ago. You'll have to wait until term starts to see him. Professor McGonagall, too. Oh, right. Harry rubbed his temples in frustration. Professor Lupin, no, he's not been at Hogwarts over the holidays either. He was close to my parents. He must know who my godfather is. Then let's think of something else, Ron said to distract him. This feeling of something hanging over you is awful. Let's do something to take your mind off it. Wizard chess? Gobstones? Or we could go see Hagrid. Wait, we forgot something. Ron turned his head slowly and looked at Harry with a cautious, hopeful expression. The firebolt. You got a firebolt. I got a firebolt. They both leaped up and shouted at once. With this, you can own the whole Hogwarts Quidditch pitch. Ron laughed, already picturing Malfoy's reaction. Malfoy will wilt when he sees you on this. This is top tier, reserved for next year's World Cup. It's like a dream, Harry murmured, his hand running over the sleek wood of the broom, while Ron flopped onto Harry's bed, roaring at the thought of Malfoy's dismay. What are you two laughing about? Hermione asked from the doorway in her pajamas. Crookshanks looped around her shoulders with a garland of gold foil decorations at his neck. She froze when she saw the broom on the bed. Crookshanks slipped to the floor unnoticed. Oh, Harry, who gave you this? Merlin's beard, Ron groaned, covering his face. We completely forgot about that problem. Harry swallowed and forced himself to go back to the question. He told Hermione everything, showed her the card and the note verbatim. Hermione read carefully, then sat on Ron's bed, chin in hand, thinking. Family affection, love, compensation, she murmured. A godfather who's been missing for years, a black dog. Stop guessing wildly, Ron interrupted. When Dumbledore and the others return, we'll know the truth. Right now, we should get Harry flying that firebolt. He needs to get his head clear. 100 laps around Hogwarts should do it. Wait, Ron. Hermione frowned, thinking further, then blinked as if surprised by her own leap in thought. Harry, do you remember what Mr. Weasley said to you just before term started? Let me think. He told me not to go looking for Sirius Black? Harry tilted his head. I still don't understand why he said that. What does that have to do with my godfather? Wait, you're not suggesting. He and Ron turned to her at once, shocked. It's possible, Hermione said quietly. Given his age, Sirius is about the same generation as your parents. His imprisonment explains why he never contacted you. He's from the House of Black and very wealthy. He could afford a firebolt. And crucially, you got a note from a godfather you'd never met right after he escaped from Azkaban, and Mr. Weasley's warning suggests there is some connection. He might worry that you, having grown up with muggles who mistreated you, would immediately try to find another relative, a godfather, and that could put you in danger because he's a wanted man. Hermione held up the note. Look at the handwriting. It looks like someone who hasn't held a quill in years. That fits with someone who's been in prison. What are you thinking? Ron asked. Don't forget, Ron said heatedly. Sirius Black is supposed to be the most vicious Death Eater, Voldemort's follower, and he's an enemy of your mom and dad. How could such a person be your godfather? He'd be trying to kill you right now. There may be things we don't know, Hermione replied. Harry watched his two friends bicker. Their familiar arguing felt oddly comforting, and an unexpected sense of relief washed over him. 175 galleons and 9 sickles. Let's round down to 175 galleons. Thank you very much, Mr. Impuri. Avada, remotely controlling Crew Impuri to puppet the homeowner into handing over the money, counted the coins with a grin. The owner of the house had spun around as if bewitched, then staggered toward him, finally realizing he couldn't apparate. You are the youngest space magic expert I've ever met. Your prospects are limitless. Here's my card. Please consider working with our family. Thank you for your appreciation. We'll meet again if there's an opportunity, the man managed. With a full bag of galleons tucked away, Avada walked half a mile before apparating back to his room above the leaky cauldron. This was the second time he'd tried this tactic. A few more attempts, and if he still hadn't uncovered anything useful, he'd go straight to Mr. Taylor to investigate further. 206. First clues. Hello, are you Mr. Fenwick? As Crew Impuri, controlled by Avada, stepped into the 3 broomsticks in Hogsmeade, he spotted the man in his 30s, rather thin, at their agreed table. The man stood and waved. You must be Mr. Crew Impuri? I'm Benji Fenwick. A pleasure to meet you. Honestly, you're younger than I expected. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Fenwick. They shook hands. Avada sat down opposite him. Just to confirm, you want an anti-apparition jinx installed, covering about half an acre around your house, correct? He produced his Ministry of Magic apparition certificate and handed it over. This is my certification. You can verify it. I've already installed apparition jinxes for 3 clients who answered the newspaper ad, so you can be confident in my skills. Wizarding Examinations Authority certified. Overall grade E+. That seems in order. Mr. Fenwick handed the certificate back after a quick verification of the seal. If you have no other questions, shall we go now? All right. They stood and left the pub. I'll take you via side-along apparition, Fenwick offered. No problem. Fenwick extended his arm. Avada took it. With a loud pop, they vanished from Hogsmeade and reappeared beside a house by a tranquil lake. Lovely setting, Avada said automatically, his 4th such compliment over the last few days. Thank you. Fenwick smiled politely. This is my residence. Here's the ministry permit. You can check it. He produced a marked parchment and handed it to Avada, who confirmed the magical seal and handed it back. What boundaries do you want the jinx to cover? From here to the lakeside, to the far edge of the garden, then from that hillside to the small shed furthest south. Use those 4 points as the perimeter. Is that possible? I'll need to measure. Avada produced a small flying broom from his sleeve, mounted it, and took to the air. From above, he measured distances with a few quick spells, then descended to probe for stray enchantments that might interfere with the jinx. After finishing the checks, he stowed his wand and looked up at Fenwick, who had been patiently waiting. To cover the area you requested will cost about 220 galleons, and the work will take 2 to 3 days. That's acceptable, Fenwick said. Shall we look at the contract? Do you require a deposit? Yes, this isn't a magical contract. Deposit 20 galleons. Avada handed over the contract template. Magical contracts aren't to be signed lightly. They imprint a magical seal on the signer's mind or life force to enforce them. Too many seals can disrupt mental and life energy and cause lingering problems until the marks fade. For ordinary jobs like this, a wand mark plus a monetary deposit is enough. He watched Fenwick read. Fenwick quickly and adeptly scanned the document, filled in the details, and both men applied a wand mark to 2 copies. He paid the deposit. I'll need a full day to prepare materials, Avada said as he collected his copy. If it's convenient, let's meet at the 3 Broomsticks at 9 the day after tomorrow, and apparat here to start the work, like today. All right, Fenwick agreed readily. Avada hesitated a beat. Then, almost imperceptibly, his mental energy focused. He freed up more of his main body's processing power and ran a subtle scan of Fenwick's mind and emotions. If you don't mind me asking, he began conversationally. The probing was careful, not invasive. Fenwick adjusted his collar awkwardly. You might not know, my family and I only moved to Britain from Australia a little over half a month ago, and I only got my residency last week. I'm not well informed about what's going on here, which worries me a bit. Don't worry, Avada said. Fenwick went on, a little embarrassed. I only did this because some friends kept urging me. Letters and conversations all saying how useful an anti-apparition jinx is, telling stories of people being apparated into their homes, ambushed, even killed. At first, I thought they'd all taken an advertisement. I asked why they suddenly recommended it, and they just said it felt sensible or that they'd been spooked by similar stories while at school. No clear reason. That's why I suspected an ad. So why did you follow their advice? Avada asked. Is this some kind of product survey? Fenwick attempted a joke, then turned serious. Mostly because they were right. My wife and son need protection. And, well, there have been some extreme opinions circulating about pure bloods lately. I'm worried something might happen. It felt sensible to prepare. You have a son? Avada asked, eyebrow flicking in curiosity before relaxing. He just turned 7 this year. He's a few years from Hogwarts. He'd probably be fascinated by you. They exchanged a few more polite words, then parted. Avada apparated back to Diagon Alley. He walked the street, ostensibly browsing shops, but his mind was occupied. This was his 4th client to request an anti-apparition jinx in recent days. 3 of them had small children. The newspaper ads and responses had shown a similar pattern: sudden, widespread interest in installing jinxes in old houses rather than after moving or renovations. Coincidence? Or something more? If there were a real threat, why wasn't there any public alarm? Why didn't people tell newcomers directly what was happening? A sharp hoot cut through his thoughts. An owl flew down, and an envelope dropped neatly into his hand. Chapter 205, Crew Impuri Targeted. A letter? Avada frowned and beckoned, pulling the envelope toward him. I've only been embedded in Britain's magical society for a week, and I know fewer than 10 people in this identity, he muttered. The envelope contained a plain, ordinary letter, no charms, no tricks. He moved to a quiet corner, tore it open, and unfolded the neatly creased parchment. Dear Mr. Crew Impuri, please forgive this sudden letter. My name is Bill Trimble, and I, too, am looking to have an anti-apparition jinx installed in my home. You probably won't see my request in the Daily Prophet. I had a friend who worked for a travel tent company who offered to do it, but he won't be available until at least next month. I recently heard that a rather young space magic expert has arrived in Britain and has already handled the jinx installations for 3 clients. I would like to save time and have the jinx installed as soon as possible. I would also be pleased to meet such a promising young talent. If you have time, please come to the Leaky Cauldron today at 3 p.m. for a chat. I understand you are staying here, so I won't trouble you with an extra journey. I very much look forward to meeting you. Bill Trimble. Have I made a name for myself already? Avada raised an eyebrow. Word traveled fast in the pure blood circles. A few days of success, and suddenly people were seeking him out. The coin he'd earned so far was already nearly enough to buy a high-end broom. Was this the advantage of being a prodigy, or had he just ridden a lucky wave? He folded the letter and pocketed it. There was still time before the meeting. He needed to buy more supplies for the job he'd just accepted. He also reminded himself to open a Gringotts vault under this identity. Having a lot of galleons without a residence would be suspicious. After buying materials, he returned to his room at the Leaky Cauldron, linked briefly with his main body's mind for a short nap, and rose at 2 on the dot. He left his room, went downstairs, and ordered a cider at Old Tom's bar. "Oh, crew, someone was just asking for you," Old Tom said while pouring. He nodded toward a table. "He said he had an appointment with you. You've been apparating back to your room these last few days, haven't you? I barely see you upstairs." "Why don't you install an apparition jinx for the bar, then?" Avada said, sipping his drink. Old Tom snorted. "Ha! Your bar is already tucked away with spatial tricks. A jinx on a place like this would be a very different price, and such a large area might not even be doable." Avada picked up his drink and walked to the table. An older wizard sat there, flipping through the Daily Prophet. Avada stepped up and interrupted. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Bill Trimble?" "Yes, that's me." The man looked up, smiled, and stood. "You must be Mr. Crew Impuri. It's not quite 3 yet, but since you've come early, would you like to sit? We can talk now." "Of course." Avada sat and almost instinctively focused more of his attention on the man's presence. The man's face carried the hint of falseness, features that didn't quite settle right, polyjuice or some similar potion. Why such secrecy for a jinx installation? Before Trimble could speak, Avada said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Trimble. It's a bit inconvenient. I accepted a client's commission this morning, so I won't be free for the next 3 days." 3 days is already fast enough for me," Trimble laughed. "My friend won't be available for a whole month." Avada watched him closely. The man's expression and tone betrayed the small lie without intending to. If he had to invent an excuse for seeking Avada out, his anxiety was revealing. "Good to hear," Avada said nicely. "We should go over the details first. How large is the area you need jinxed? Do you have any other space magic or enchanted items in the house that I should know about? Any other circumstances, children, pets, unusual visitors? When I last installed a jinx, the client's child kept trying to prank me. If you have children, please make sure they're kept away." At the word children, the man's demeanor shifted abruptly. Tension, suspicion, alertness flickered across his face. A clue had just been delivered. "Ha, don't worry, my son graduated ages ago and is working overseas," Trimble said too quickly, forcing a smile. "The property is only about 1/4 of an acre, no other space magic. It shouldn't interfere with your work. May I see your contract?" "Of course." Avada handed over his standard contract. Trimble read it with exaggerated care, but But Avada felt more than saw the man's actions. Silent, wandless detection spells were combing the parchment. They were fast, practiced, and discreet. A cold prickle ran down Avada's spine. This man was not an ordinary client. He was a skilled practitioner, probably a combat master by his effortless use of multiple wandless spells. Avada's own mental strength was high, but if it came to a direct clash, he might be outmatched. Someone with that level of skill had identified him and sought him out for a reason. He folded his hands and kept his face calm. Inside, he cataloged the new threat. A masked man, talented with wandless magic, watching him closely. What did he want? 208. Planning something evil? These are all very reasonable requests. After Bill Trimble had worked through nearly every detection spell he knew, he slowly handed the contract back. It's clear you're very careful. Shall we sign now? Sorry, not yet. The man in front of Avada had his mind firmly shielded with occlumency, and coupled with his obvious combat skill, Avada dared not attempt any legitimacy. Generally, he said, before I sign, I inspect the site in person. Only after detailed negotiations will I officially sign, minimizing the chance of a breach of contract. I don't want my reputation damaged, and it will probably put your mind at ease. I understand. Trimble nodded without much expression. When would it be convenient for you to go? Either today or tomorrow, whichever suits you. Perfect. Shall we go now? I can apparate us. All right. They left the leaky cauldron and apparated to a plain, roughly patched matchbox of a house. Avada stared. The building barely deserved the word house. There wasn't a single solid, permanent enchantment on it. Everything looked like temporary patchwork. If no one renewed the magic regularly, the place would probably collapse within a fortnight. There were no other magical traces inside. No clock charmed to run without batteries. No self-floating rags to dust the furniture. No brooms. No flue connection. It didn't look like a real home at all. How large an area do you want the enchantments to cover? Avada asked. Not very large. A 50-foot radius centered on the house will do. Trimble seemed determined to keep Avada at a distance. Rest assured, there's no spatial magic in my house, and it won't interfere with your work. I can't learn those deep, complex arts, so you only need to inspect the surroundings. All right. Avada didn't press further. He produced his broom and took to the air. As he circled and pretended to survey the terrain, his magical senses remained trained on Trimble's every move. The house had clearly been cobbled together as a deception, but judging by the magical residue, it had been built about a week ago, around the same time Avada finished his second client's job. Had Trimble been watching him for a while? Why? The identity he'd been using had done nothing unusual, just taken an exam and installed enchantments for 2 clients. Did Trimble know something he didn't? Avada raised the broom slightly higher and narrowed his eyes. When he'd mentioned children earlier, Trimble had grown visibly nervous, as if afraid Avada might harm them. Most of Avada's previous clients had had young children. Was Trimble testing him? And that interviewer, Taylor? Something must be happening again in the magical world. A chain reaction from previous incidents? Or were some Death Eaters stirring up trouble once more? Had Dumbledore really managed to keep them contained? All right, Mr. Trimble. The terrain around the house was flat and simple, so the inspection shouldn't take long. After a moment, Avada descended. As you said, this place is easy to work with. To install the enchantments, I'll need 120 galleons, plus a 15-galleon deposit on signing. That's reasonable, Trimble nodded. Shall we sign now? Yes. Avada produced the contract. After watching Trimble scrutinize the parchment from start to finish, Avada signed. The tension in his shoulders eased a bit. That's it. Find me at the Leaky Cauldron in 3 days. I'll be leaving now. Very well. See you in 3 days, Mr. Imply. See you. Avada rotated and vanished with a soft pop, not by apparition, but using the Ji-Chi Tianya charm, a spell that hides a person within a spatial interstice. He wanted to see what this mysterious man was planning. From his hidden spot, he watched Trimble react. Trimble immediately drew his wand the moment Avada disappeared. He summoned a broad stream of water to flush the area, then activated a supersensory charm to search for hidden presences. After confirming there was no invisible intruder, he methodically checked every place Avada had passed through, including the air above them, and then checked himself. He looked suspicious, Avada thought. This fellow definitely knew something. Once Trimble exhausted his precautions and convinced himself there were no lingering tricks, he relaxed slightly and sent his mental power out to apparate to a certain destination. Avada tightened his grip on his wand. Normally, wizards have no way to track where another wizard apparates. The mental pathway collapses the instant the wizard withdraws the thought, leaving nothing to trace. But Avada could perceive the spatial passage before it fully opened. He waited for the instant Trimble's body vanished. Pop! The passage snapped open. Avada used his own power to hold it just long enough, then slipped through. 209. Death Eater Black. Whoosh! After a few seconds spent setting up a full suite of stealth enchantments, Avada slipped into the spatial passage and gave chase. The moment he felt the air shift around him, he threw a disillusionment charm and a point-me spell. Folding himself into the spatial interstice, everything flowed perfectly, without a hitch. He landed in what looked like a small village, a handful of neat, well-kept houses not far off, several cars parked nearby. Sunlit meadows and ponds ringed the cottages, and a vineyard seemed to lie just beyond. The place was quiet. Only a few muggles could be made out in the distance on the grass. No one else. Where is he? Avada scanned with his magical senses and found no trace of a witch or wizard. The figures in the houses were all muggles. Gone already, in just a few seconds? Keeping the disillusionment charm, he slipped out of the interstice and inspected the surroundings carefully. A disguise? Impossible. No competent disguise could be manufactured in a few seconds. Altering someone's mental signature was out of the question. There was no method in the magical world that could change a person's mental energy structure, and even he couldn't do that. Wait, that door, the spatial pattern around it seemed slightly off. He stepped closer, about to analyze the subtle anomaly, but the trace smoothed over almost as fast as it had appeared, much like the spatial passage earlier. No evidence remained. The wizard had likely just left, leaving only the faintest echo. That signature, a little like a portkey, but not quite. He couldn't identify the exact mechanism, only that it was some spatial technique. Damn it, why is this one so cautious? He apparated, then instantly used a portkey-like thing to get away. There's still no magic that tracks apparition. What's he so afraid of? Avada drew his wand and checked the door thoroughly. It was not a disguised magical object, and there was no one inside who specialized in spatial magic. To be safe, he logged the location so he could apparate back at will, then apparated back to Diagon Alley. During the earlier conversation, the man had shown no overt hostility, only intense wariness and distrust. Was he testing him? As he walked through the magic supplies market, Avada replayed their exchange. Had he done anything to provoke suspicion? Had his work installing anti-apparition jinxes for certain pureblood families put him at odds with someone? But if that were the case, the man would have been openly hostile. And why mention children? Could someone be targeting the descendants of pureblood families? He pushed the thought away. If that were true, his previous clients would have been alarmed and on edge when he'd brought up children. But they hadn't. Bill Trimble. Trimble, wasn't that the name on the author of Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection? No, probably a false name. The man had been in disguise. He had too little information to draw any conclusions. He sighed. If he wanted to investigate further, he'd have to wait until after he installed the apparition jinx in that Matchbox house and then observe the man's reaction. Alternatively, he could start with the interviewer named Taylor. Taylor wasn't a familiar pureblood surname in Britain, was it? He needed to figure this out. Pureblood families had only recently suffered a severe blow. This was precisely the time trouble might arise. And if someone truly meant to harm children who hadn't even started at Hogwarts yet, he would have to pursue it. Thanks, Padfoot. The forest canopy was thick, a green roof that swallowed most of the thin winter sunlight and left the woods looking darker and more forbidding than even the white snow could soften. Remus Lupin stood shoulder to shoulder with Sirius Black, wands drawn, faces set, staring at a group of people bound and sprawled in the snow before them. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't have been able to figure this out, Lupin said. I would have only been able to take limited precautions based on rumors, which would have been useless here. Being an animagus still pays off. Sirius said, trying for lightness, but the humor didn't reach his eyes. His expression was harsh. These scum, they get even worse when they break free of their master. They never truly broke free, you know that, Lupin replied. His head shook slowly, as if it ached. Even Lord Voldemort couldn't fully control them. I don't suppose I'll be teaching at Hogwarts next year. To be honest, if it weren't for my contract, I'd leave now and deal with this. You focus on teaching, Sirius snapped. Leave this to me. Leave it to you? Lupin looked at him, startled. Don't forget, these were Death Eaters. They should know you. No, Moonface, they don't. Sirius cut him off with a sneer. The Death Eaters were rigidly hierarchical. People like Wormtail were known only to the inner circle. Now most of that inner circle is in Azkaban, or badly hurt by Dumbledore, so they aren't in a position to cooperate with the scum hiding in the shadows. To the ones out here, I'll look like a loyal, highly skilled Death Eater. He spread his hands, a dangerous smile flickering. What's suspicious about one Death Eater approaching his former colleagues for help? 210, unexpected reunion. One last check. Okay. Mr. Tellenboo, the apparition ward has been installed. Please inspect it yourself. Avada wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve, stood, and slipped his wand back into his pocket. His movements were practiced and unhurried, his tone that of a technician with 10 years' experience. The previous 3 days had been fairly calm. Crew Impuri's operation had been uneventful and had finished Mr. Fenwick's last commission, turning a small profit in galleons. Hogwarts had returned to normal after the Christmas break. Apart from Professor Lupin, who had seemed distracted after not returning for the holidays, things were quiet. There were the usual minor disturbances. Harry Potter, hailed as the savior, suddenly producing a firebolt and sending Quidditch players from the other 3 houses into a panic, Dumbledore lifting the ban on Saturday morning visits to Hogsmeade, and Snape's apparent dislike for Lupin growing a little sharper, but nothing remotely catastrophic. Avada had just finished the commission from the suspicious Tellenboo, and now waited for the client's inspection. He planned to dig into whatever Tellenboo was up to once the job was done, using the old tricks he preferred. Let me try. Tellenboo drew his wand and traced several elegant arcs through the air, then tested apparition by spinning his body into different positions. He only relaxed into a smile when he had thoroughly confirmed the ward covered every corner Avada had claimed it would. Well done, Mr. Impuri. You're an excellent spatial expert. How many galleons do I owe you? 105 galleons, sir. Avada glanced at Tellenboo's demeanor. There was a nervous aura about the man that didn't match his pleasant smile. The original price was 120 galleons. You've already put down a 15-galleon deposit. Oh, must have forgotten. Tellenboo kept up his flawless smile, counted out the correct number of gold coins, and handed them over. By the way, Mr. Impuri, I've heard you've been taking temporary jobs since you established your identity here. Ever considered steady work? I have a friend who started a travel tent design company. He'd be thrilled to have a talented young man like you join him. I'm sorry, Mr. Tellenboo. Avada shook his head decisively. I prefer a freer life. This suits me. Tellenboo's smile flickered in a way that suggested he was still testing. He offered an apologetic grin, and with a casual gesture, guided Avada a little closer to the edge of the apparition ward. Finally, he clasped Avada's hand. Then I look forward to working with you again. Your standards are trustworthy. You flatter me. Time to be going. Avada stepped out of the ward's range. See you next time, Mr. Tellenboo. Before Tellenboo could reply, Avada spun and with a soft pop slipped into the spatial interstice. Let's see what you're planning. Back in normal space, the friendly smile evaporated the moment Avada vanished. Tellenboo's face altered. He touched his cheek lightly with his wand, and the lines of his weathered, middle-aged features twitched as if stirred by ripples on water. When the transformation finished, he looked like a different middle-aged man. No one would have linked the new face to the old one. He stepped beyond the ward's boundary, produced a small, delicate badge from his pocket, and pressed it. Pop! Another wizard materialized beside him, a tall, thin, middle-aged man. Did that person leave? Yes. Tellenboo nodded gravely. I can't find anything at my level, so it's up to you now. All right. The newcomer closed his eyes, raised his wand, and slowly traced the apparition ward. A brilliant blue glow issued from its tip, and the surrounding air shimmered with faint colors, light and shadow weaving in time with the movements of his wand. Indeed, no problems. He finally extinguished the glow and relaxed a fraction, just like the previous 3 wards. It looks like he truly has nothing to do with those incidents. Are you certain? Telenbu's unease returned. Doesn't it seem a little too convenient? A man whose background can't be traced, forging an identity, appearing quietly just over 2 months after the incidents began, and demonstrating expert spatial knowledge, even during his final assessment. The newcomer interrupted him, brow tightening. It's not that he appeared too coincidentally. There are already far too many victims. Telenbu stiffened. How many are we talking? Within the ministry alone, International Magical Cooperation and the Department of Magical Games and Sports, over 10 staff members have already been affected. Many of them hold important positions, and beyond the ministry, it's spread even wider. We can barely keep up. Is it that bad? Telenbu's voice had gone hoarse. It's worse than we feared, the other wizard said. Their support is deeper than we imagined, he sighed, and we're lucky so far. If they'd targeted one of our professors directly, who knows how powerful they might have become right under our noses. Honestly, the situation is precarious. Any progress from Belby? Telenbu asked. Very slow, almost no effect on the current crisis. He and the headmaster still want to try infiltrating Azkaban. That'll fall to us then, all thanks to Sirius Black. The comment hung in the air, bitter and resigned. The 2 wizards had lingered long enough. They stepped out of the ward's range and vanished with the sharp bang of apparition, leaving the place empty. Avada, crouched in the interstice, was so stunned he nearly forgot to breathe. The suddenly appearing wizard, he knew him. Benjamin Baker. He hadn't seen him in 3 years. 211, Mystery School. Avada didn't even remember which direction the 2 had gone. The instant Professor Baker appeared, he froze. Then it took him a beat to confirm that the face before him was indeed the Baker he knew. The man who had once sealed Baker's main soul into a Horcrux, who had given him that enormous book that still mattered so much, and whose crystal ball had once held half of Lord Voldemort's soul. With the soul sense he'd developed last year, Avada had finally been able to read Professor Baker's soul. After being away for a few years, Baker had apparently managed to make a complete Horcrux. A subtle void marred his soul, and what remained in his body was the primary fragment. But Baker's reappearance wasn't even the most shocking part. What really left Avada stunned was how much information Baker revealed in his conversation with Telenbu. A large number of staff in the Department of International Magical Cooperation and the Department of Magical Games and Sports had been affected in some way. From the way they spoke, it sounded like many employees across other ministry departments had suffered incidents as well. Damocles Belby, the man Avada had once admired, seemed to be connected. They all sounded like members of the same organization, and they used words like principal and professor. A school? Beauxbatons, Durmstrang, or someplace else entirely, and they were planning to invade Azkaban. Who were they, and what did they want? He apparated back to his room at the Leaky Cauldron, briefly cut off control of Crew Impuri's body, and let his consciousness slide back into his main body. His main body was sitting in the entrance exam room. Their paper was nearly finished, and with plenty of time left, a short mental break was justified. Calm down and sort this out, he told himself. They had an organization and real intelligence capabilities, enough to know how many people they had inside the ministry and to look into the origin of his identity, though he'd bet they wouldn't find it. That explained why the book Baker had given him contained so much dangerous knowledge. Baker hadn't been acting alone. He had teammates. Telenbu beside him was already an impressive combatant. If they were bold enough to plan an Azkaban infiltration, there must be more fighters among them. The book was likely a shared spoil or repository. That organization was frighteningly capable. They could hunt dark wizards in groups, infiltrate Azkaban, possessed advanced knowledge like methods for creating Horcruxes, and had research minds such as Belby. Their scale must be comparable to the Order of the Phoenix. What kind of person ran a school like that? Even the book alone could send a student like him soaring. Imagine what its members could do if everyone learned that material. He suddenly realized the twirling feeling in his hand was wrong. His quill had slipped off the desk. For the last minutes, he had only been fiddling with a few feathers. Quills really weren't made for tricks. He picked the pen up and refocused, pushed through the remaining questions, making good progress on the paper. But his mind kept circling back. According to them, they infiltrated Azkaban to solve the current crisis. What did that mean? Was there someone locked up there who knew more? If that were all, why risk a full-scale infiltration? Couldn't they just commit a petty crime and get inside briefly? Azkaban wasn't exactly a pleasant place, but there were ways to get in without a raid. He told himself not to get stuck on speculation. The only thing he could confirm was that something secret and serious had happened in the wizarding world, and the departments of international cooperation and magical games and sports had been hit hard. Probably the reason the interviewer had acted so strangely. The recent push by pureblood families to install anti-apparition jinxes made sense in the same light. People sensing something wrong, though most only knew a vague threat rather than the details, just as he did. I need to find out more. He spent a few focused minutes finishing the whole paper so he could clear it from his mind and devote the remaining time to thinking. Dumbledore would have noticed something, too. Too many notices about anti-apparition jinxes had been appearing lately. With Dumbledore aware, Avada felt less personally threatened. His real worry was that unknown organization that included Baker and Belby. Who were they? What were their aims? And why were they operating under the guise of a school? Could any of this be tied to next year's Triwizard Tournament? Since Baker had given him that book, he was probably on their radar. Baker had also seen some of his trump cards. He needed to be proactive, confirm whether this group posed a threat, and learn what they were planning. The next step would be to start with the interviewer and dig into what had happened. A bell chimed, signaling the end of the exam. Avada set down his quill and handed his paper to the supervising professor. Then rose and went to the next examination room, his mind already moving through plans for investigation. 212. There is a shady story. Even though the start of term tests were over and students could finally stop fretting over whether their holiday revision and homework had been enough, the atmosphere at Hogwarts, especially among fourth years and above, showed no sign of easing. If anything, the top students grew more anxious. Except during curfew, the library was almost constantly full of people studying. Fifth years were only a small fraction of those who stayed late. The reason was simple. The second half of the year mattered too much. 2 of the 4 deans had begun recruiting for large-scale projects, and countless smaller ones, Chamber of Secrets Ecosystem Survey, Chamber of Secrets Architectural Style Analysis, and the like, were also open. Professor McGonagall's basilisk brain model research even offered the chance to be credited on a paper. These were the sort of opportunities that made ambitious students study like mad and scramble to join any project they could. The basilisk was the hottest topic in academic circles right now, and Hogwarts's professors and resources were more than enough to ensure top-quality research. Adding one of these projects to a resume could transform a student's future. Chances like this came once in decades. All of that shrank to insignificance the moment the other news broke. Dumbledore himself had initiated a project, a field expedition into a dark arts ruin, and an experiment to attempt to synthesize soul-affecting factors from non-living matter. Dumbledore's own project, Albus Dumbledore. Even a sliver of resources from him was unimaginably valuable to ordinary students. Even more striking was the roster he'd invited to collaborate. Nicholas Flamel, the legend of alchemy. Babajide Akingbad, a transfiguration authority who rivaled Professor McGonagall. Rutherford Poke, Dean of St. Mungo's Hospital. Severus Snape, Master of Potions. Every name added weight and brilliance to the project until the whole thing shone like a supernova. It instantly became the single most prestigious research endeavor in the international wizarding world, and Hogwarts students were being offered the chance to participate. Anyone who understood these names went frantic. Rumor had it that after the announcement, some already graduated students publicly confessed past school violations, hoping the school would let them revoke their diplomas and repeat a year to qualify. As for current students who could actually take part, well, Their minds were made up. Avada felt the pull too. He already held 2 top-tier research notes and had responsibilities elsewhere, but the chance to observe and consult with those giants of magic thrilled him. The project was also deeply relevant to his work. The soul was a poorly understood field in wizarding society, where humanistic constraints made experiments rare. For someone who could literally see souls, who had spent 3 years studying Horcruxes, who possessed the Resurrection Stone and had made tangible progress, Avada couldn't ignore it. His own research had hit a bottleneck. The project of extracting Horcrux fragments without damaging the host object had stalled. He couldn't miss the opportunity to clash minds with the best. So he was surprised when he was summoned to the headmaster's office and told he could skip all assessment procedures and sign the final participation agreement immediately. "Professor, don't you think this might be a bit much?" Avada asked, bewildered, pointing at himself as he stared at the smiling, white-bearded man across the desk. Between them lay a quill and a thick stack of densely written parchment. "What's not good about it?" Dumbledore replied, cheerfulness undimmed after the holidays, as if he had endless reasons to be pleased. "That ruin was left by Lord Voldemort. I specifically stipulated that students who have made significant contributions to combating the dark arts be admitted without examination. Who do you think that was meant for?" He said it plainly, without a trace of shame. "But the trouble is, it seems you're the only one who accepted without hesitation. Harry Potter?" "I did want him involved," Dumbledore went on, shrugging with mock regret. "But Professor Hagrid and Kettleburn insisted on taking him into Parseltongue research, and Newt, an old friend of mine, wrote asking for Harry's help. I couldn't refuse them." "Baron, Hermione, Luna?" Avada asked. "Like you, they understand their strengths," Dumbledore said gently. "They chose the projects that suit them best." Dumbledore's face remained mild, but his eyes took on a depth that made Avada uneasy. "Do you remember the 2 conjectures I mentioned when I gave you Nicholas's notes? I haven't seen proof yet, but my intuition keeps pushing me toward them. I'm beginning to think they're correct. You may be more qualified for this work than I first imagined, Ken." There was a probing edge to the words. Avada had been quiet for a year after the Chamber of Secrets crisis. Dumbledore was testing him. The feeling of being manipulated rankled. And yet, by strength, by trust with Dumbledore, and by the state of things, everything had reached a turning point. The time to tell Dumbledore about the Horcruxes in his possession was drawing near. Avada wanted more time. He still hoped to continue researching ways to strip Horcrux fragments without destroying the host objects, and he wasn't sure what effect the sudden appearance of the Resurrection Stone would have on Dumbledore. For now, he kept that to himself. "So any other questions, Mr. Ken?" Dumbledore probably hadn't guessed the maze of thoughts running through Avada's head this time, and a triumphant smile spread across his face as Avada fell silent. "None." "Then glance over this agreement in front of you and sign it. Otherwise, you might miss dinner." "Understood, Professor." Avada lowered his head to look at the stack of parchment agreements. The thick sections were mostly definitions and detailed clauses. The core of the document boiled down to 2 points. First, no unauthorized disclosure or private use of results from this research. Information could only be taken outside with the joint approval of all key personnel. Second, the knowledge gained could not be used for evil, with several pages devoted to defining what counted as evil. It was a complete, exceptionally binding magical contract. Its strength made Avada feel nearly powerless. But grinding down, an attachment spell with mental force was always his go-to solution. It would be harder than breaking the curse on the Resurrection Stone, but not impossible. That made sense. In the current magical community, understanding of the soul was virtually nil. The soul was synonymous with mystery and power. If terrifying research results were likely to be misused, preemptive, strict restrictions were the best safeguard. Compared to 3 years ago, Avada's mental power had increased dramatically. Clauses that would once have left him dizzy, he could now read through in minutes. Satisfied the agreement contained nothing unexpected, he signed, his true name with his wand. "That will do. The agreement will remain with me for safekeeping." After watching him sign, Dumbledore waved his hand and the stack of parchment vanished from the desk. He pushed his half-moon spectacles up and smiled. The other students? Assessments are still ongoing. The experiment begins in about 2 weeks. I'll notify you in advance. All right, it's almost time for dinner. Be quick. Relaxation like this will be rare in 2 weeks. Leaky cauldron, a guest room. Crew Impuri lay on the bed, rolled up in his clothes, eyes closed and motionless, except for the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Then, without the stretch or yawn of someone who had just woken, he snapped his eyes open. He slid off the bed with the crispness of a man who had been ready to move, drew his wand, and cloaked himself in a full suite of concealment charms. With a subtle turn, he vanished from the room and reappeared in the Ministry of Magic's main hall. Ajichi Tianya, he silently intoned, the incantation's name, meaning literally a foot away, yet 1,000 miles apart. He felt his wand's familiar tug, and his vision went black as he entered the spatial inner layer. Made it. The ministry's still open. After leaving Dumbledore's office, the first thing Avada had done was strap on the control device, reclaiming full command of his Crew Impuri persona. He hadn't dared use that equipment openly in front of Dumbledore. Given Dumbledore's abilities, the disguises Avada used probably wouldn't have gone undetected. Now his goal was to find the interviewer named Taylor, tail him to see if any clues surfaced, or, if the chance presented itself while Taylor was relaxed, use legilimency. He needed to uncover whatever hidden events were unfolding in the magical community as quickly as possible. In 2 weeks, the other half of his mind would be pushed into high gear. If he wanted to take the initiative and be ready to respond to emergencies, now, while he could still allocate significant mental power, was the best time. Because of the device's limitations, he could at most allocate about 80% of his mental power to animate this body. Still, with the body's attributes, the effective combat power he could bring to bear exceeded that of his primary body. He could withstand most spells directly. Even if disarmed, the body's materials allowed for more powerful wandless magic. The body's magical senses also gave useful early warning. But if it came to a full-strength fight, Avada's main body back at Hogwarts would show anomalies, and this wooden body might suffer self-healing damage that he'd have to repair personally, so he should avoid outright combat whenever possible. International Magical Cooperation Department, 4th floor, found him. Avada had memorized Taylor's mannerisms, so he picked him out immediately in the department crowd. Taylor looked more than just eager to leave. He was troubled. Closing time was near, but his agitation wasn't explainable by that alone. When the clock hands hit the appointed mark and no one gave him any reason to stay, Taylor stood, gathered his papers, and strode out to the apparition hall. He opened a spatial passage to a prearranged destination. Just as it began to close, Avada stabilized the portal and slipped through. He'd prepared a full cloak of invisibility beforehand, so he didn't need to waste time on it now. He's fine. Don't worry. Everything's fine. As the body returned to normal space, a soft voice with a hint of sobbing reached his ears. Avada found himself in a warmly lit room. Paneled wood covered the walls, photos and posters hung here and there, and a stone fireplace glowed, casting light across 3 figures nearby. Taylor, a woman with red-rimmed eyes, and a child of 6 or 7. "I'm really fine, Daddy. Don't worry." Then a bright, childlike voice chimed, "I've been feeling better and better these past few days, like I have energy for everything." The instant he looked at the child, Avada's concealment nearly faltered. His heart slammed against some deep, instinctive alarm. Werewolf. 214. Mysteries abound. Werewolf. Avada remembered the feeling distinctly. The 3rd time in his life he had been hit by that particular stomach-dropping mix of panic and suppressed anger. The last time had been when he found Filch petrified after leaving the abandoned lavatory. The time before that was when Lord Voldemort had killed Quirrell, split his soul, and slipped through the trap. A child this young, with 2 ordinary human parents, couldn't have become a werewolf naturally. Current studies said the lycanthropy imprint was rooted in life force and generally did not pass down genetically. The only recorded exception was when 2 werewolves mated in wolf form under a full moon, producing litters of true wolf pups that grew into beautiful wolf-like creatures with near-human intelligence. That had only been documented twice in all known history. So for this child to be a werewolf, Something else had to have happened. Another werewolf must have actively attacked him and deliberately transmitted the curse. The connection snapped into place all at once. Avada felt his chest tighten. He forced himself to take one long, quiet breath to keep from making a sound. Someone, a werewolf, was attacking children in the magical community, deliberately and on a large scale. No, that couldn't be the whole picture. He forced himself calmer, the composure born of long exposure to danger settling back over him. If this had happened, why hadn't the news spread through the wizarding world? Why hadn't the ministry acted? Why were threatened pureblood families and the rich only installing apparition wards instead of taking more drastic measures? There were still too many gaps. Calm down. Observe. He watched the child more closely. The boy was making faces to cheer his worried parents, who themselves wore frowns that didn't make sense. The werewolf imprint on the child's life force was textbook, the same kind of curse mark Professor Lupin carried, the same mental level signature. On the surface, there were no more clues until Avada noticed the faint, hidden trace beneath the primary imprint. Someone had tampered with the curse mark. It was an obvious, artificial magic signature attached to the base framework and positioned to interface directly with the curse. It still contained a function to receive something. The purpose wasn't consistent with any healing or standard countercurse. It was something else. He would need to study it more closely. Slowly, silently, he let his wand slide into his palm. With a soft, rhythmic, nonverbal motion, an almost imperceptible force flowed from its tip and washed through the room like a wisp of light. Yawn. Taylor, doing his best to hide his worry, yawned and rubbed his eyes. I think I'm a bit sleepy. Are you too tired from work, dear? Yawn. Now that you mention it, I think I'm a little sleepy too. Merlin, isn't it a bit early to sleep? Snore. Snore. The yawn spread like contagion. The cursed child was the first to drift off. The parents forced themselves up just long enough to carry him to bed and cover him, then surrendering to the drowsiness themselves. All three were unconscious before long. Now, let's see what really happened. Avada whispered, and eased an invisible force to pry Taylor's eyelids open, revealing somewhat unfocused pupils. Taylor had reacted strongly when Avada had mentioned the case earlier. He must know something. Who had turned his son, and why? Avada had only recently decided to avoid abusing legitimacy, but he told himself this was necessary. He leaned over Taylor, ready to step into his memories. Whoosh! Bang! The instant Avada sensed something off, he dove aside. A crackling red bolt sliced past and smashed into the cabin wall where he had just been standing, sending splinters and a shower of dust into the night air. He'd been sloppy. He had followed the spatial passage Taylor had left straight into the house without checking whether anyone else was waiting outside. The sound of apparition confirmed it. The attacker had followed him out. In an instant, he apparated out of the clearing and slipped into the darkness. The house, a small wooden cabin in a grassy clearing, stood where it had before. Avada vanished into the spatial interlayer with a quick, practiced gesture, concealing himself in the fold between spaces. His wand moved again, and a potent, hidden magic condensed at its tip. If the ambusher was an accomplice of the werewolf, or the werewolf himself in some guise, capturing him would be better than prying into Taylor's memories. Defeat him, and the secrets would spill out. He ghosted in the interlayer and slid behind the figure who had attacked him, preparing to spring out and strike from behind. Then he froze. The life force wasn't that of a werewolf at all. It belonged to an ordinary wizard. But his mental power blazed like a bonfire, dazzling, immense, the kind of raw magical force you'd expect from the most senior teachers, on par with Flitwick or McGonagall. Most unsettling of all was the defect in his soul. The pattern of his mental structure was shockingly familiar. Professor Baker? How had he come here? Why was he waiting for Avada? 215. The big boss is actually next to me? The figure before him showed no signs of disguise. His expression was natural, and the void in his soul was almost impossible to fake. This was, without doubt, the real Benjamin Baker that Avada knew. Wait! Avada snapped his offensive spell back, instead weaving a thick shield charm and pouring his mental power to the limit. He slipped out of the spatial interlayer to a point a good distance from Baker, and the moment he cleared the jump, he shouted, I know you. You're Benjamin Baker, a director of the International Black Magic Defense League, aren't you? You know me? Baker instinctively dodged when the voice came from behind, bringing a solid shield up in an instant. He frowned, staring at Avada's face. I've heard of you. You're one of those who go after dark wizards, very righteous. Then there must be some misunderstanding. You wouldn't be a werewolf collaborator here to guard that child, would you? You know? Just found out. Avada relaxed his stance a little, lowering his wand and shrugging. I've done some research on werewolves. It isn't hard to tell them apart. Now it's my turn to ask, Mr. Baker, what are you doing here? Baker kept his shield raised, his expression solemn, as if he would strike the moment he felt anything amiss. Since you've seen it too, there's no point hiding. I'm here to stake the place out, hoping to draw out that werewolf. Boom. The ground beneath Avada detonated. A surge of scorching fiend fire shot up and blasted him into the air. The flames twisted into a single braided rope and snapped toward the floating Avada, binding him tight. With a dull thud, the bound object slammed back to the shattered earth. It wasn't a person, it was a stone. At the same moment, Baker's figure, triumphant behind his shield, dissolved into motes of light and vanished. That had been an illusion. From start to finish, the attacking intent in the mind behind the illusion had never faded. Baker had intended to subdue before speaking. But the illusory body hadn't fooled Avada's magical senses, and he'd been ready. The fiery rope around the stone flared and then collapsed. The ground trembled as if a fierce fight raged below. In seconds, the scarred earth had pooled into a small lake, and two figures burst up through the water and hurtled out. In an instant, within a radius of dozens of meters, lights braided and thick magical radiance shimmered. Natural phenomena that normally couldn't coexist swirled together. Cumulonimbus clouds condensed overhead and shed blue glowing droplets that were blown sideways into a blade-bearing gale. The lake's surface froze into a sheet of ice that periodically split open, belching either molten lava or strangling vines. Countless translucent blades floated menacingly, ready to take the life of either combatant at any moment. How marvelous. While desperately parrying Baker's assaults, Avada let the remaining 20% of his mental power admire the scene. 4 years ago, he'd needed guides, traps, Baron's help, and the room of requirement to capture a weakened imposter Baker. Now he could stand against Baker at full strength for a considerable stretch. It was a defensive, reactive kind of endurance, dodging, neutralizing, sometimes barely counterattacking. But it relied on his precognitive magic sense, his body's tolerance for some spells, and his familiarity with Baker's style. Still, he was holding on. This was the full-force assault of a Dean-level wizard. Roughly, they were evenly matched. "There's no need to keep fighting, Mr. Baker," Avada shouted. He had wanted to use his signature mental link to feed Baker information, to find an opening, but Baker's mind was sealed with occlumency. So Avada resorted to the most primitive method, shouting. The cottage's occupants were sleeping soundly under his spells, and the fight was far enough from the house that he didn't need to worry about being overheard. "I know about you. I know Shafake." The magical storm above and around them dimmed by more than half. For the first time in the tangle of assault, Avada could see Baker's face clearly, startled. Avada seized the moment and unloaded his words like a rapid-fire cannon. "When you taught at Hogwarts, you made a Horcrux, a black crystal ball, didn't you? He never told me outright, but I could tell. That crystal withstood fiend fire, and it ended up sealing Lord Voldemort's soul." Taking advantage of Baker's momentary blankness, Avada continued. "And I also know that making a Horcrux doesn't necessarily require murder. Someone explained the method to me. So I can't call you a dark wizard. You're Mr. Shafaki's man?" Baker interrupted, bewildered. "Were you sent by him? Then why didn't I receive notice? We've already investigated this. There's no need for anyone else here." "You'll interfere with the original plan. Does the principal know about this?" Avada shot back. The flood of information crashed into Avada's mind. Wait, Baron had been in contact with Professor Baker? Baker actually addressed him as Mr.? They were both tied to that mysterious organization called the School and were investigating the recent werewolf incidents? The big boss was right beside me? "Forgive my presumption, Mr. Baker. What is the full name of the Mr. Shafaki you mentioned?" Avada asked, trying to process it all. Johnson Shafiq? Is it necessary to verify with such a low-level method? Baker scoffed before suddenly pausing, his gaze sharpening. Which Shafiq are you talking about? Baron Shafiq, Avada said. I'm his distant uncle. Baker went utterly still. 216, the werewolf crisis is spreading. Baron Shafiq? Beck froze for a long moment, then slowly recovered his composure. Mr. Shafiq's son? The one who goes to Hogwarts? That's right, Avada nodded. You were the defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts for a year, and he was your student, wasn't he? He told me about you, and even showed me the prophecy orb you gave him. To be honest, I was shocked when I realized that thing was actually a Horcrux. And you're Johnson Shafiq's man? Are you the one investigating the werewolf situation? Beck tried to steer the conversation, but the other man didn't seem thrown. You're lying. Beck's eyes sharpened. We looked into your background thoroughly and couldn't find a single lead. Mr. Shafiq definitely knows about this. If you know him, why didn't he tell us? He even recommended to the headmaster that I be sent here to monitor things. Because he doesn't know I'm here. Calm down, let me finish. Avada lowered his wand, but it only slightly diminished Beck's rising hostility. I know Baron Shafiq, not old Johnson. I didn't know you were connected to him, and I didn't know you were investigating the werewolf matter. I only came into Wizarding Society to research pureblood families and make a little money. I didn't expect to stumble into something like this. We shouldn't be enemies, unless you're behind turning that child into a werewolf. Can your two invisible companions lower their wands? For a moment, Beck was silent. Then he made a grim gesture. Two wizards, who had been cloaked by disillusionment charm, materialized behind Avada, men who had appeared a few minutes earlier while Beck and Avada were talking. Long time no see, Mr. Tellenboo, and this unfamiliar gentleman, Beck said by way of greeting. The two surprised wizards, urged by Beck, stepped away from behind Avada and joined Beck's side, whispering doubts to one another. Are you sure you want to give up just like that, Benjamin? No need to be overly wary for now, Beck interrupted, but his peripheral vision stayed fixed on Avada. He knows about my Horcrux. The two men flinched slightly. Good. At least that means we don't have to fight. Right now. Avada smiled and spread his hands. Your suspicions are unnecessary. You could bring me to old Johnson and ask him, see whether he recognizes me. Beck waved a hand, but his gaze remained wary. What I need to know now is, what have the werewolves done? Why is society in a panic, with everyone frantically installing anti-apparition hexes, and yet no news has leaked out? What's actually happened recently, and what are you doing about it? This isn't a secret. Beck nodded, though caution flickered in his eyes. The werewolves, or rather most likely Fenrir Greyback and his followers, have been making major moves lately. They acquired some kind of magic technique. If it's grafted onto a werewolf, it can simulate the effect of a full moon and directly trigger the werewolf curse. In other words, if that mark is placed on someone, they can be made to transform into a werewolf at any time, anywhere, and the choice of when they transform is controlled by someone else. Avada's pupils narrowed as realization hit him. He knew now what the magical mark attached to the child's curse must be. And? Then Fenrir gathered a large band of werewolves and, backed by an unknown patron, obtained funds and resources to mass-produce wolfsbane potion. Beck's voice grew colder. After that, they started what you've seen. They began covertly targeting the descendants of influential wizarding families, turning their children into werewolves, placing that mark on them, and then blackmailing their families. They promised to provide wolfsbane for free before every full moon to stabilize the children's condition if the families agreed to cooperate and work for them. Conversely, if anyone tried to expose them, if the conspirators sensed a leak, if someone lost contact, or if anything suspicious happened, they would detonate the implanted curses in all the victims at once, forcing simultaneous feral transformations. Silence hung between them. No one wants their child to become a monster, and no one wants to take responsibility for the ruin of so many families. So as long as the werewolves didn't make absurd demands, the threat was devastatingly effective. They specifically preyed on the vulnerable, avoiding targets connected to enforcers and aurors, which is why this hasn't reached the public yet. We only learned the truth through legilimency after one of our operatives nearly suffered an attack. Avada said nothing for a long time. He had been studying werewolves for a while and knew the community's fragile state, so he was not surprised that such a crude, brutal scheme could work. Being a werewolf in wizarding society was a social death sentence. Work, friends, loved ones, money, trust, even basic rights could vanish simply because of the label. No parent would willingly let their child face that future, so the offer of wolfsbane, even if it meant cooperation with criminals, was a powerful lever. And don't imagine the ministry would just supply wolfsbane freely to a large group of people, Beck continued. If they were that magnanimous, why would they have enacted the harsh laws that have led to werewolves' current status? Besides, with the new technique to trigger transformations at will, the problem extends from at the full moon to any time. Preventing it would require taking wolfsbane every single day. Who can afford that? 217. Unprecedentedly powerful spatial technology. What is their current scope? Avada asked with difficulty. We haven't compiled a full list of the victims yet, and search results and statistics may be incomplete, but judging from what we know, their attack range shouldn't be very wide. Baker shook his head. They have to choose targets carefully. The people they control with wolfsbane potion each month need to be valuable enough to justify the cost. They need families and descendants, and the children can't be too old enough to attend Hogwarts, for example, and risk a professor noticing something wrong. Those are unavoidable constraints. So, based on the list we've already put together, their operations should be limited in scale. Mr. Tellembu, who had once investigated Avada, added in a low voice, "That's why we only publicize the news about installing anti-apparition jinxes among small to mid-level pureblood families and wealthy circles. Under the current circumstances, blindly expanding the warning would invite accidents." You released those notices? Avada widened his eyes. That's one of the few practical measures available right now, especially without any technological breakthrough. Baker nodded. There's also a baiting element to it. See if we can lure werewolves into attacking under the pretext of installing jinxes, or try to tamper with the jinxes. You were once a primary surveillance target for us. And just a few days ago, you were taken off the suspect list, Tellembu grumbled, because I had dealings with someone who was attacked when I was processing paperwork? Avada pointed toward the small wooden house still lit in the distance. You suspected I came to contact him or something. We still do, to some extent. So what about the real culprit? Any idea who's behind this? Who gave Greyback that technology to go on instantaneous rampages, and who supplied the materials and potion makers to produce so much wolfsbane? We don't have a conclusion. We can only speculate it's the work of certain dark wizards and suspect some pureblood families are involved. Baker weighed his wand in his hand. I think I've revealed enough. In fact, we've exposed half our organization to you, quite a vote of trust. So, are you going to come with us to meet Mr. Johnson Shafiq to prove your trustworthiness, or are you going to keep opposing us? Where are we going? Shafiq Manor or somewhere else? Avada asked. That's hard to explain right now. Baker relaxed when Avada sheathed his wand and gave no sign of trying anything. He and the others waved their hands and began to repair the damaged earth between them. Just follow us. Baker took an old, metallic-looking key from his pocket, extended his arm, and pressed it into the empty air ahead. The key vanished into nothingness, the front half disappearing as if sliding into a lock, and there was a soft click like a latch turning. Baker turned the key and pulled. An invisible doorway opened, flooding bright light from within and revealing an enormous interior. Avada, sensing it with his magic, couldn't help but marvel. That key was a reverse port key. A normal port key instantly transports a person to a set destination. This device did the opposite. It pulled the destination space outward, creating a door to anywhere that could be opened anywhere, anytime. It bypassed the usual port key limits, number of people, single-use constraints, could break spatial jinxes, and allowed protective magic to be applied to the target location without worrying about trapping the return. The cost, of course, was an extremely high technical threshold and a very difficult manufacturing process. Until now, Avada had never imagined this approach. How many geniuses did this organization employ? Come in. Baker stepped through the doorway and beckoned him. Avada recovered from his surprise and followed. The expressions on Baker and the others were calm, their magic behind the door deactivated after recognizing Baker's identity. Crossing the threshold gave Avada no sensation of travel, no constriction like apparition, no tug of a portkey. It felt as if the two spaces had merged, confirming the power of their spatial magic. The other side opened into a vast hall, more like an indoor plaza, spacious as a stadium with a ceiling about 10 meters high. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, bathing the room in light. Dark oak planks covered the floor. A large carpet in the center held a piano, sofas, and bookshelves. A few people in their early 20s chatted and read in the lounge area. Around the edges, marble walls were set with enormous doors, each 2 or 3 people high, indicating the space extended far beyond what Avada had expected. "Wait, this space," Avada said, realizing something and turning to Baker with wide eyes. "You created this with the undetectable extension charm? A highest-level undetectable extension charm? As expected of a spatial expert, you can tell at a glance." Baker nodded with approval. "Correct. This space doesn't exist in the physical world. There's no need for anti-apparition jinxes here. Apart from specific activation methods, nothing can enter this space that's isolated from reality. Apparition, portkeys, phoenixes, house elf teleportation, they're all ineffective. Come with me. Mr. Shafiq should be here now." They must have forgotten to block the vanishing cabinet. Otherwise, Avada would have been disconnected immediately. After the door behind him faded away and his body felt normal again, Avada let out a long, quiet breath. They really had forgotten to shield the vanishing cabinet. Still, he couldn't entirely blame them. Primitive, obscure, alarmingly expensive, difficult to craft and deploy devices like a vanishing cabinet hardly seemed worth taking special precautions against. Yet every corner of this hall thrummed with detection and protection enchantments. If someone tried to sneak in with a small vanishing cabinet, they would be flagged at once. Honestly, this was one of the most heavily guarded places he'd ever seen, rivaling Gringotts' high-security vaults in many respects. The human, material, and time costs must have been staggering. He could hardly imagine what kind of backing these people had. "Follow me. It's this door," Baker said. While Avada was still turning everything over in his head, Baker was already leading him to a large door. He watched as Baker performed a few gestures. The door opened on its own, revealing a long corridor and a figure standing inside. "Taft?" Baker froze for a moment as the door cracked open. When he finally saw the face beyond, confusion softened into surprise. "Why are you on duty? Isn't your side supposed to be—" "I'm the laziest person left," the old man with a deeply lined face said wryly. "Belby's turned into a madman, dragging people into the lab and working around the clock, and the principal supports him. I can't do much here, so since I'm idle, I came to stand guard." "It's not his fault," Baker sighed. "Anyone who discovered that the results of their painstaking research, intended to help people, were being twisted into something monstrous wouldn't react well. He probably regrets giving out the Wolfsbane potion formula so freely. And he probably despises Greyback and his allies to the core," Taft agreed, then turned his gaze to the newcomer. "By the way, weren't you on an outdoor mission? Who is this? A new professor?" "No, I had an accident and had to bring him to see Mr. Shafiq," Baker replied. "Oh, if it's Mr. Shafiq you're looking for, he just chatted with me and then went to review some files in Library 3. Cough. Taft threw a quick look at Avada, then shifted into a brisk official tone. "He should be in Library 3. Go there." "Understood. Thank you." Baker inclined his head and led the way down the corridor. Avada followed, questions piling up. That brief exchange had revealed far more than he expected. If his history of magic memory served him, the surname Taft belonged to a pair of ministers for magic, mother and son, from more than 30 years ago. The man in front of him looked 50 or 60. Could this really be Ignatius Taft, the former minister? And the assembly of talent implied by the place, counselors of the Black Magic Defense League, top potion masters, heads of influential families, masters of spatial magic, even ex-ministers, was staggering. Merlin, what was this place? He forced his shock down and matched Baker's pace. There was still another barrier to pass. After a few minutes, they stopped at another wooden door. Baker knocked lightly and stepped back. The door opened to reveal a room no larger than the Hufflepuff common room, lined with neat rows of shelves stacked with books and folders, more like an archive than a library. Standing in the doorway was a tall, upright, middle-aged man with a weary expression. Johnson Shafiq, head of the Shafiq family and father to Baron, whom Avada had met a few years earlier. Avada felt conflicted for a moment. "Benjamin?" he said quietly. "Mr." Shafiq glanced at them and showed a flicker of puzzlement. "Why are you back so soon? And who is this?" "Don't you recognize him, Mr. Shafiq?" Baker said, narrowing his eyes and subtly covering his left hand with his sleeve. "He claims to know you and your son. He also knows about my Horcrux, otherwise I wouldn't have brought him here so hastily." "That's fair, Mr. Shafiq. I wasn't using this face when I last saw you." Avada had readied himself. He smiled calmly at the wary pair. "My current name is Impuri. It's a pleasure to see you again, Mr. Shafiq." "Very well, Mr. Impuri." Old Shafiq stared at him. "Then the name I remember. May I ask what it is?" "It's best not to ask, Mr. Shafiq." Avada's expression went suddenly grave, and before either Baker or Shafiq could react, he continued, "That name is taboo. Even Dumbledore avoids mentioning it." A look of surprise crossed Mr. Shafiq's face. He remembered something from 3 years ago, a time when he had spoken in a whisper, as if afraid to disturb it. That name once brought a bloodbath to the wizarding world. Even Dumbledore hides it. Believe me, you don't want to hear it. No one would want to hear that name. Silence fell. Baker realized the old man was recalling something important and did not interrupt. Impuri, Impuri." Mr. Shafiq muttered to himself, then looked up, disbelief etched across his face. "It's you, 219. Magic University. It's me." Even though he knew, deep down, this should have been a serious moment, Avada couldn't stop the corners of his mouth from twitching into a smile. His eyes, which had been nervously flicking about, had already betrayed him. Old Shafiq, who had once gone out of his way to help conceal Avada's identity, and had taken quite a hit because of it, stared at him, baffled. He had been completely fooled by those words back in Avada's 3rd year. If Tom Riddle hadn't been so determined to kill him, if a flaw in Riddle's plan hadn't revealed the truth at the last second, and if Baron, Harry, and Luna hadn't provided their tacit godsend help, Dumbledore's work might have come too late. Hogwarts could have been wiped out. So standing there and saying the same words now, then watching the stunned reaction, felt ridiculously satisfying. "How are you here?" Old Shafiq managed. He still looked incredulous. "Aren't you supposed to be? Amazing magic, Mr. Shafiq." Avada bit off a laugh. "Don't worry, I won't neglect either side." You're Ken?" Professor Baker, who had been standing nearby, took several stumbling steps back. For a moment, he looked as if he were facing a monster, then his hesitation hardened into certainty. "You are Ken! You know about my Horcrux. You know Baron. You're familiar with my fighting style. You can predict my spells in a duel. You're a name people don't say. And you won't neglect either side. Merlin, is it really you?" "Long time no see, Professor." Avada felt awkward. He hadn't expected Professor Baker to recognize him so fast. He'd been putting on an act for longer than he thought. "You can stand here like this. How did you do it? An autonomous Horcrux? Or, it's the move you taught me." He kept the full details back out of respect for old Shafiq. "I've improved it a bit, Professor." "Merlin." Professor Baker stared at him for a long moment. "It's only been a few years, and you've come this far. I wasn't wrong about you back then." "Thanks to you, Professor. If you hadn't entrusted that book to me, I wouldn't have advanced so quickly." "You opened that book?" Baker smiled at first. "When?" "Right at the beginning of my 2nd year." The smile vanished. Heavens, that's truly unexpected. Old Shafiq even had to lean on the doorframe. "How is Baron doing lately?" "Not so great, Mr. Shafiq." Avada adopted a mock-serious expression that made old Shafiq start. "Gryffindor's seeker, Harry, somehow got a firebolt, which really annoyed Baron. He's thrown himself into Quidditch training in every spare moment. He doesn't want to lose on the pitch." Old Shafiq pursed his lips. Avada cleared his throat. "Oh, right. I told him a while ago about the recent large-scale recruitment to install anti-apparition jinxes. He said he'd write to you. Did you get his letter?" "I received it a few days ago, but I haven't had time to reply. I've been rather busy." Old Shafiq's tightened expression softened. The last trace of wariness in him faded. Running into you like this, what are you planning to do now? Investigating pure-blood families, Avada answered frankly. They took a heavy loss last year. I don't expect they'll just let it go. And Dumbledore publicly exposed what I did, so those people will remember me. For my own safety, I need to learn everything I can about their next moves, and I also want to do something for the wizarding community. That's like you, old Shafiq snorted. Dumbledore probably doesn't know you can appear like this, does he? No, this is my private arrangement. That's good. Old Shafiq turned to Professor Baker. I think your old idea might be worth developing. He's already excellent, isn't he? Professor Baker nodded. Yes. Seeing the tension lift now that his identity was out, Avada finally let his curiosity loose. What exactly is this place? Who are you people? That Taft you mentioned earlier, he was the former minister for magic, right? And Belby, Tellembu, those powerful dark wizards in that book, you all worked together to bring them down? That's what we want to explain to you, old Shafiq said, smiling. Benjamin, you tell him. The principal should be at home, but it's a bit late now. You can see her tomorrow. I have other things to attend to. All right, Mr. Shafiq. We'll leave then. Professor Baker watched old Shafiq step back into the archives and close the door. Then he turned to Avada. Let's head to my office. We can talk as we walk. It's just down this corridor. Ken, or should I call you Crew now? Gladly, Professor. As for your first question, what is this place? Baker fell into that familiar, slightly mysterious smile of his. This is a university, a place for young people aged 17 and older who have finished magic school but want to continue learning in a systematic, structured way. It's probably the first magic university in the world. With Norberic University, Avada supplied, recalling his history of magic. Norberic. Baker's voice carried a note of respect. The first Muggle-born minister for magic in British history. He left office in 1968 due to illness. He founded this school? Avada asked. Yes. Professor Baker's eyes softened. He founded the university and served as its first principal. After his death, we named the university in his honor. He'd seen more effective teaching models in Muggle society and wanted to adapt those methods for our community. In the process of building this school, he came to understand our world more deeply, and his purpose for the institution went beyond mere instruction. He did many things before becoming minister, and many things after. We can go over all that later. First, you need to understand the present situation. I'm a professor at this university, Baker continued. The Tellembu, Belby, and Taft you heard about were indeed my colleagues. Taft was the former minister. Mr. Shafiq sits on the board of governors. As for the current principal, you should know her name. Who is it? Avada urged. Miranda Goshawk. 220. The story behind the confidentiality law. Miranda Goshawk, the author of the Standard Book of Spells series, Britain's greatest educator? Avada raised an eyebrow. If it's her, that explains a lot. But from the way you sounded just now, I thought your principal was Gellert Grindelwald. That's our vice principal. Huh? Avada stiffened. The weight of Professor Baker's words sank in, and he spun around, eyes wide. You're remnants of the wizarding supremacists? No. Professor Baker shook his head and chuckled. Most new professors react the same way when they first hear this. Our founder has always been Norby Ridge, but he did absorb quite a few remnants of the wizarding supremacists and even gained Grindelwald's personal approval and support. In fact, many of our key techniques originate with him, and several former supremacists, like the Rosier family, teach here. Grindelwald's approval and support? Avada jumped back 2 paces. You even infiltrated Nurmengard? How on earth did you get him to support you? We were surprised then, too, but it's not incomprehensible. You can't expect an old man who once stirred up the world to sit isolated in a fortress for 50 years doing nothing but eat and sleep, can you? Baker shrugged. As for our educational philosophy, there are certainly similarities with Grindelwald's. Those are conversations for another time. This is my office. They walked a few steps and a plain wooden door had appeared at the side of the corridor. Baker tapped the doorknob with his wand, and it swung open. Directly opposite the door hung a faintly glowing mirror. Beyond it lay a modestly sized, tastefully furnished office. Desks, chairs, bookshelves, a fireplace, shelves of teaching aids, everything in order. 2 cups of coffee steamed on the desk, freshly poured. "Come in and sit down. You have a lot to catch up on." Baker closed the door, gestured to the chair opposite, and pushed a cup of coffee toward Avada. "To explain things properly, we need to start with the state of our society." "Ken, you're Muggle-born, aren't you?" Baker asked. Avada nodded. "Have you ever wondered why a magical society that's lasted for thousands of years has no proper university, a place to teach advanced knowledge? Why must wizards stop formal education at 17 and go to work, getting only limited on-the-job training? Wizards live long lives, and the body of magical knowledge is vast, but there's no institution specifically designed to teach advanced theory and research. Why?" Avada was quiet. Baker leaned forward, his voice sharpening. "There are over 10,000 wizards in Britain, but most know only the basics taught at Hogwarts. Enough to live comfortably, not enough to innovate. Only those who work in major magical firms, special institutions, or who belong to pure-blood families get access to deeper learning. How many people is that? Probably not 500. Think about it as if it were Muggle society. What would it look like if fewer than 1/20th of the population had ever attended university?" "What caused that?" Avada asked softly after a moment. "Partly the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy." Baker nodded. "On the surface, the statute is one of the main reasons. The logic goes that restricting the spread of magical knowledge reduces the potential for destruction, prevents wizards from drawing Muggle attention with flashy magic, and thus protects us from Muggle persecution. That's the theory." "The theory?" Avada echoed, catching Baker's emphasis. "In theory," Baker said with a bitter smile, "Muggles persecute wizards, so wizards must hide and limit conspicuous magic. What a neat loop. But consider this, when the statute was enacted in the 17th century, Muggles' most advanced weapons were flintlock muskets. Back then, magic schools already existed in many countries. Hogwarts had been around for centuries, wands were common, and methods like apparition and broom travel existed. Wizards then were often skilled in combat magic. Do you really think a group of Muggles with flintlocks could have driven them underground? Even against a Muggle army, those wizards would have had little trouble. Shield charms, apparition, confundus. Wizards usually hid within Muggle society and didn't have to confront Muggle militaries. So why would they be pressured into disappearing from society? The real reasons are buried under layers of complex social change," Baker said, taking a sip of coffee. "But I can tell you some of the bigger truths. The 17th and 18th centuries were turbulent. Beyond Muggle hostility, the greatest trouble came from the Goblin rebellions. In fact, one of the main motives for the Statute of Secrecy was not so much to hide from Muggles as to free up wizards to deal with the goblins. After the statute was enacted, the Goblin rebellions were quelled after a few skirmishes. The goblins scarcely suffered for it, and they even gained control of Gringotts, the economic lifeline of our society." "So who controlled magical society then?" Baker asked, watching Avada. Avada thought back to his rudimentary history of magic and realized what Baker was getting at. "You're very perceptive," Baker approved. "At that time, the Ministry of Magic didn't exist yet. The governing body was the Wizards' Council, the heads of the various wizarding communities." "The heads of the wizarding communities?" Avada blurted. "Exactly," Baker nodded. "Those heads were all from pure-blood families.